we can answer that question now. So, like, people that are listening, now is one of those times. Are you sitting at the counter or are you part of the mob? That's a Luke 4 moment to me when Jesus unrolls the scroll and says what he says, and the synagogue gets so pissed off at what he says that they try to throw him off the cliff. Are you standing on the precipice with Jesus, or are you part of the mob trying to push him off? Those are the choices that we have right now. And I think it is that stark. So that for me is personally like, no, no, no. I'm going to go sit at the counter and I don't care what it costs. Number one. Number two, you mentioned it earlier. Look at me. I have the privilege of being fearless because what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Nobody's legislating against me. Nobody's trying to legislate my body. There's no laws limiting me. So if you're going to give me this privilege, then damn it, I'm going to use it to undo everything that you're trying to create.
Hey friends, welcome to The Sacred Slope. I'm Alexis Rice, and I'm so happy to be able to introduce Pastor Joe Smith to you. I'm sure a lot of you already follow him and already know who he is. He's a pastor out of Gainesville, Florida. What I think is so special about Pastor Joe is that he has navigated a lot of worlds. Like he has felt like he has been on this side of feeling like he was a Christian nationalist, and now he is speaking out for Jesus when he sees injustice, especially in the name of Jesus. He's not afraid of calling out people and systems when they are oppressing people or hurting the marginalized, which really is what Jesus called us to do. He talks about a healthier version of masculinity, which I think is really beautiful. I love that he is bald and fit and then wears a Be Kind shirt and has just a little subtle rainbow watch to let people in the LGBTQ plus community know they're safe with him and in his church. So enjoy. I can't wait for you to hear.
There's beauty in unraveling, safety in the questioning. Home is where you're wandering. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be.
Welcome back, friends. Today's guest is Pastor Joe Smith, a bold and unflinching voice in the movement to reclaim Christianity from white Christian nationalism and harmful theology. Hi, Joe.
Hey, it's so good to meet you. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, thank you for being here. So, Joe, you're known for your viral sermons and unwavering commitment to justice. And you are the lead pastor of Shift GNB in Gainesville, Florida, where you're building a community that's rooted in love and liberation and the radical message of Jesus. Joe went to college at a fundamentalist Christian college in Joplin, Missouri, and graduated with a BA in biblical literature. And Joe's been in the independent Christian church since his first church in 2002. And I understand that you grew up fundamentalist in the Free Will Baptist Church. Is that right?
That is correct. Good times.
Like many of us, Joe encountered faith in pieces through online sermons, hard questions, and a deep hunger for truth. Whether he's preaching from the pulpit or challenging the church online as the real Joe Smith, he calls Christians to confront complicity and complacency and to choose a better way. His voice speaks powerfully to deconstructing Christians, progressives, and anyone longing for a gospel that actually looks like Jesus. This is a conversation about reclaiming the gospel, confronting power, and believing still that love can change everything. So, Joe, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
So let's talk about when you first felt that call to ministry. What drew you into this work, especially given how outspoken and countercultural your voice is in today's Christian landscape?
Well, it wasn't always that way. Like you mentioned earlier, I grew up in the fundamentalist Free Will Baptist denomination, and I was very much a people pleaser. And so I was really, really good at playing the part. And it's exactly what I was doing. But I got a lot of praise I got like just people applauding. I was told multiple times growing up that God had big plans for me, like God was going to do something really big. And that, I mean, it may sound silly now, but that really impacted me growing up. And I've always felt this pull to God or spirituality. I can remember the night where I had like this really emotional connection with God. And I'm totally fine with saying, you know what, it might just have been completely emotional. Like, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. But it was out in the field and like it was, no light pollution. You could see, you could see the freaking Milky Way kind of night. And it was one of those, moments as a teenager that we all have where, you just feel like deeper, more connected. All those, angsty teenage feels like at 18, and you don't know where you're going and all of those things. And that was the moment that I felt like I was actually, to use the language, called into ministry. But early on, it was just same old, same old. I was just regurgitating, what I had been given and maybe maybe dressing it up a little bit. Like if you talk to any of my youth group kids from those early days, it was probably more relatable, maybe a little bit more humor based, just hanging with the teenagers type of stuff. But it wasn't until like early 2010s that those things began to change.
What changed?
Well, honestly, I got a hold of some books. I had some people hand me some books that were written by people that were outside of like the norm for me. So it was like Rob Bell was one of the early ones. Shane Claiborne, Jesus for President was one. And there was a book, man, I can't think of the name of it. The author's his name is Christopher Hewitts. And these books just kind of started wrecking my worldview. And so that was the first time I really started, like 2010, right in there. I really started questioning the whole system. And then the church that I was at the time up in St. Louis was a megachurch model church. We weren't a megachurch at the time, but that was the goal. Literally stated that was the goal. So we operated in that mode. And there were some decisions being made by the elders that, while not illegal, they were not illegal, like at all. But I felt like that they were very questionable, bordering like unethical. I'm the kind of person that if I see something wrong, I just can't keep my mouth shut. Sometimes to my own detriment. So it became quite a challenge, our elder meetings. And even like our lead pastor, he had decided that he wasn't going to fight anything. And he even said that I'm too old. He was younger than I am now and said he was too old to fight these battles. So I was like,
Oh, wow.
bullshit. But yeah, so the stuff that I was reading, the people outside my normal system that were speaking these things early on and have been speaking these things for so long, right? And then what I was experiencing behind the scenes of the American church just kind of like gelled together to really start like wrecking what I thought was, the church, what it should be.
Hmm. Your posts are often very much standing up to Christian nationalism and saying this is wrong. This is a distortion of the loving gospel of Jesus. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw that you felt like, hey, this is not the faith that I recognize or that I feel like I am going to follow?
Okay, so there are two stories that pop into my mind immediately when you ask that question. One is about manipulating people to get a desired outcome. So one of the things that we would do behind the scenes is that we knew that, and listen, I'm not this way now, okay? But I was very good at manipulating your emotions. Very good. I knew how to perform a sermon. I knew when I would get laughs. I knew when I could get you to cry. I knew when I could get you into your feels or like pump you up. I was very good at it. And I thought at the time, and I'm young, I'm so much younger than, then it was like my mid to late 20s, early 30s. What I was told was like we are setting we're setting a scene, we're creating an environment where people can experience God, right? So in my head, that's what I'm doing. And I wasn't the lead pastor at the time, but I helped teach some too. But one of the things that would happen is that we knew that, like, okay, this particular service is going to be powerful. So we want people to feel free to make decisions. So what we would do is it was planned out that there would be basically plants in the audience that at the right time would come forward so that other people felt comfortable or whatever. We had people in each service that at the right time would then stand up and like either come forward or, sometimes it was like the old youth groupy kind of like you go to the cross and you do some experiential thing. We had people planted. And I know that sounds really nefarious and it feels that way to me now. At the time, it did not. But that was a pretty regular practice of having people planted, even in the worship service, to raise their hands in certain sections of the auditorium. The second story that really rocked me was there was a moral failure with one of the elders, and he had an affair. And this guy, and how do I say this without it? He was such a good dude. Okay, the, it was just one of those things where life happens, right? And there was no it wasn't like the pastor and a subordinate. There was no power dynamics. It was literally just, two people in broken marriages. Shouldn't have done it that way. Absolutely. But he just made a mistake, right? And it was literally that. And instead of walking with the families in the middle of all of that, and this is a guy that had been like part of the team for years, like years. Like the week before it came out, he's a brother, you know what I mean? And then they just dropped him like a hot potato. Didn't talk about it, completely covered it up.
Okay.
And I was
Yeah.
so furious. They're like,
Yeah.
Are you guys kidding me? You said that this guy was your friend, and then you're just going to cut him off. And, they would do the thing about like wherever it's at, where Paul or whoever said it about like, cutting off the sexual immoral, don't even have, eat with them or whatever. But I was just like, no, come on. People, this is stupid. Like, you literally called this guy a brother the last meeting, and now you're just going to completely cut him off. And that's what they did. They didn't talk about it. They didn't address the fact that our head elder was no longer part of the church. They just swept it under the rug. And that was one of those moments where I was just like, this is not anything we're talking about on stage. Like, this is trash.
Yeah, it's funny the sins, the moral failings that are excused in church and lifted up, and then there's others that will get you excommunicated, and there's this it seems like there's just this whole fundamentalist framework
Yeah.
that you don't even know when you're signing up to pray a sinner's prayer, and that's all you have.
Yeah, if he would been the one up on stage, it would have been painted differently. But since he was just a behind the scenes kind of guy, we reconnected later afterwards, after it all kind of died down. And I just told him, how immensely, deeply sorry I was at how he was treated. I will say this, and in everybody's defense, they did a really good job of loving on the spouses, the people that were just kind of caught in the wake. And I will give that to them. They did a fantastic job of walking next to them and loving them in a really healthy way. They did a good job of that. But I just felt to me like this guy's our friend. Like
Mhm.
I'm like he messed up, 100% messed up, and he needs to freaking own that. And however they decide to make amends in their life, that's on them. But like I'm just not going to turn my back on this person because you decide that it's going to be too troublesome for the church, that quote it's going to hurt the ministry of the church if we talk about this. Yeah, not going to do that.
So that faith shift that you've talked about, it sounds like it happened over time, like it was sparked with some books, but then also with experiences. I imagine some of our listeners will hear that they're going to feel maybe some things that I feel. I find that there's warning bells going off in my head, even if I don't believe things anymore about what I was taught when I was young. So an example of that is Dr. James Dobson. We grew up with him, right? As like, he's the good one. We should follow him. He's all the focus on the family. The thing is that he warned us against like, progressive books. Don't ever open a progressive book because your faith is going to unravel and you're going to learn about all these things. And so I think for some of us, like getting the permission from a pastor that we're not doing something wrong, because a lot of people I've noticed who deconstruct are actually, like, the most intense Christians, like, the ones who have always really been church kids and really have wanted to, like, seek and understand the truth, who are in Bible studies all the time. So can you speak a little bit to that about, Christians who are maybe still in evangelical spaces, who are just feeling a little bit of, like, I'm just trying to be a Christian here. I'm in an evangelical church, but something doesn't feel good. But I know I was told I can't, go over here and look at all this stuff because, that's of the devil. What would you say to people who are struggling with that?
Read, ask, go right now. Stop listening and go find the book, and then you can come back and finish this. Yeah, being on the other side of things, what I've discovered, and everybody goes through a period where, like, the uncertainty of it all now, because certainty is comforting, right? Like, there are moments in life where I miss feeling like everything is answered and it's easy. That's super comforting. And there's a time period where uncertainty feels chaotic and, like the world, the rug's just pulled out from underneath you. But eventually that feeling goes away and uncertainty becomes so much deeper and more beautiful and more life-giving, more healing, more whole than certainty ever could. Um, so I it blows my mind. It blows me away. And I say this from the stage, I say this to everybody. It is the height of, I don't know, arrogance, idiocy, ignorance. I don't know what phrase you want to put. And I don't mean that in an insulting way. Like, but that we decided that the most important thing about this creator of the cosmos, right? Scripture describes God as where we find our existence. We have our being in this thing we call God, right? The most important thing about that creative spirit, existence, life, whatever you want to call it, is what we think about that thing. That's the most important thing, is what my opinion is on that thing that's creating things that I can't fathom the pictures that are coming from the James Webb Telescope. Are you kidding me?
Yes, they're incredible.
Right? I can't, my brain does not compute that in this image, there's 10 million light years from one side to the other. I cannot comprehend that. And yet, you're telling me that my thoughts on the thing that created that holds that thing in existence, is the most important thing about that God. That's lunacy. That's absolute lunacy to me. If God is as big as we say God is, then no question is out of bounds. Did Jesus not say, "Seek and you will find, ask and you will
He did.
receive"? Right? And then he also said, who's going to lead us into all truth? Not the Bible, the Spirit. So there are things it's just like, oh, I understand that people want safety and it's easy. It is easy, but it's so incomplete. Just so incomplete. And so I always tell people, like, it's going to feel really bad before it feels really good. But then once you get past it, it's amazing. You just have to go through it. I got a good friend who's over there in California who's a therapist, and she says all the time, you have to feel your feels. You got to feel your feelings, and it's the same thing. If you're in hell, you got to keep going. This is the only way to get through it. You just got to keep going. So my encouragement as a pastor, as somebody who literally deconstructed on stage with a faith community and come out the other side of it, the other side is a gazillion times better. And even knowing all of the loss that I would experience and all of the pain and all of those things, it's still, oh my gosh, every friendship I lost, I gained like 3 or 4. Like, so I don't mean that in a mean way, but the people that decided to leave, bye. I but what I was blessed with on the other side of that is just so life-giving.
Okay, let's talk about that part. So, a lot of people who I think are deconstructing, they're there, right? So they've read a couple books or they're listening to podcasts, they follow you on social media or people like you, and but they're doing it alone. People are feeling like they're islands, just I don't know what to do anymore. And so what I think is so important is what you said about you deconstructed in community. And part of the Sacred Slopes goal is to help people realize that there are so many churches out there to support your deconstruction. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Like your church, right? Like if someone's deconstructing, they read Rob Bell's book, they're like,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm here. I think I'm supposed to be here. And I'm freaked out. What would a deconstructing in community look like?
Yeah. Well, and just to be fully honest here, our church is in the midst of a merge with another church here in town, and I am the lead pastor at Shift, but I'm going to be pastor of something else, like when the merger's finally done. But we share the same values, which is why we wanted to like do this and kind of just strengthen what the two of us were doing separately, because we knew going into the season we're coming into that community was going to be so important that we said, we're going to lay down all this other stuff. We're going to figure out how to merge this thing together so that we can build a bigger community. And not in the same way from the places that we came from, right? It's not about attendance. It's literally about how do we strengthen community in a season where they're going to try to rip us apart. I think that there are a lot of places that people can do that. It's really hard to find. One of the things that we did locally was that we created deconstruction groups, and they were all online. They were Zoom groups so that people would have a space, and we kind of just talked through. A lot of it was, they had theological questions, or there were like always two topics that people wanted to talk about. One was hell and the other one was queer inclusion. And so those were kind of like the big two theological things that we would kind of dissect to go through. But it was more about just people being able to be together and say, "Oh, wait, I'm not alone." And sometimes it was just people locally, and then I had a couple of groups where they were from all over the place. They just happened to see it and reached out, and I was like, "Yeah, here's a link. Jump in." But I think one of the biggest lies that we experienced is that walking away from the church is walking away from Jesus. And
Our
that
local church, that was the one little local that has all the authority and all the right answers.
And that's not true at all. At all. I would even argue that you don't need this institution to find Jesus. You don't need this institution to live in the way that you're called to live, right? In a life of love. I think being in community is helpful as long as that community is healthy. I used to be a personal trainer, and I did group fitness classes. And the gym that I worked at in town had real community. Like, there was bonds that were formed during those workouts and after, the time in between classes and stuff. And this was like 5 years ago, and I'm still friends with so many of them because there was a common goal. And so that common goal, you had people, and it was helpful, right? There was like real accountability, not this manufactured thing. It was accountability because, like, are you okay? There was real care there. And so I always tell people that whatever the common goal is, it's always better to do it in community because, like you said, then you don't feel alone. Like, there are other people that are walking through that same season with you. But one of the things that maybe this kind of speaks to what you're talking about, but I think it's probably one of the grosser aspects of church is that, well, this, you probably experienced this. Your whole world is tied to that church.
Your whole
Right,
world.
your friends are there, your community's there, and it's so hard. It is so hard to make friends as an adult. It's so hard, and so church is a really easy place to do that because you have, like, this common thing, right? And it's weekly, you're there, you see each other all the time, or if, like, small groups, so you're interacting with these people, like, twice a week, um, and so when they say, like, "No, no, no, don't open that book. No, 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 don't ask that question. You cannot listen to that podcast. Are you kidding me?" And your belonging starts getting threatened. And then all of a sudden they withdraw that. And then so my I always tell people here, our faith community, which is it's being called Maison, which is it's part of a Greek word, doesn't matter. But I'll tell people, like, this can be part of your community. It cannot be your whole community. Like, you've got to find other places. You've got to. Like, the church cannot be the only place. It can be a place for that simple reason, what you just said.
Something I love about you, Joe, is that you're a social media pastor as well, right? So you have this calling to enter the wild, wild west of social media.
That is it.
And you're doing that as a white ball man. So maybe when people look at you, there might be assumptions.
Oh, yes.
And so what I love about your presence is that you're just so fearless. Like, you're consistently speaking out against white Christian nationalism, racism, and this theological cowardice, right? I want to know what is driving that for you. Like, what is compelling you to continue to show up and speak boldly in these spaces when it really does put you at odds with mainstream evangelical culture?
Well, that's first, let me say that's incredibly kind of you because I just never I never put it in terms like that. There are two reasons. Okay. One is personal and one is systemic. And I guess they're both kind of tied together. But personally, I grew up in a very white, homogenous community. It's still that way. It's much larger, and there's a bigger non-white presence there, but man, it's still minuscule compared. Like, at one point in time, it was like 98 point something percent white, overwhelmingly conservative. Now it's super MAGA. my hometown. It's always so uncomfortable going back there. But anyway, and so I would read history. I've always been a history buff. It's one of my favorite subjects. And so there are certain time periods in history that always like drew my attention. Pre-World War II Germany, the rise of the National Socialist Party is one. American Revolution is one. The Civil Rights Movement is one. And I always asked myself, starting in like high school, what would I have done? If I had lived in the 60s, if I were this age in the 60s, would I have sat at the counter with John Lewis and taken the beating? Or would I have been part of the white mob doing the beating? Would I have joined the march from Selma? Or would I have stood with, and I know that Bull Connor was not at the march at Selma, but would I have been with Bull Connor in allowing students to die? You know, and that's the only reason we know that Jack Wagon's name is because of how evil he was. Like, think about that legacy. But I always asked myself, what would I do? And what I began seeing in like those early 2010s, and it's because of privilege that it took me that long to see that. And I recognize that 100%. Um, is that we can answer that question now. So, like, people that are listening, now is one of those times. Are you sitting at the counter or are you part of the mob? That's a Luke 4 moment to me when Jesus unrolls the scroll and says what he says, and the synagogue gets so pissed off at what he says that they try to throw him off the cliff. Are you standing on the precipice with Jesus, or are you part of the mob trying to push him off? Those are the choices that we have right now. And I think it is that stark. So that for me is personally like, no, no, I'm going to go sit at the counter and I don't care what it costs. Number one. Number two, you mentioned it earlier. Look at me. I have the privilege of being fearless because what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Nobody's legislating against me. Nobody's trying to legislate my body. There's no laws limiting me. So if you're going to give me this privilege, then damn it, I'm going to use it to undo everything that you're trying to create. And then I was part of the system for so long. Like, when it comes to the church, if you went back, you will never find a sermon of me condemning any specific group from this stage. Like, even when I was non-affirming, I never did that. But I just never found it to be very helpful. I felt like if there was kind of those things needed to be done in a conversation and relationship. But I was complicit in the systems that did that. And the moment that I woke up to that and the sorry.
No, thank you.
And the immense harm that I was part of. So my sorry. So my everyday now is my repentance. And so I will spend every day that I have left working against it because I supported it for so long. Yeah. I did not mean to do that, but those are my whys. Those are my whys. And so if I can, anything that I can do, I'm going to do it.
Thank you for being so vulnerable. It's so important to see and to know, like, this is life and this is really important stuff, and God has placed you where you are in the body of Christ for a reason, and you're living in that. And to be able to have me and others see and hear that passion behind you, like, that you care so much for his people and you feel their pain. And you're using your privilege to stand up for others. I mean, we need you so bad right now. So thank you for your work and your willingness to be vulnerable. We need examples like you right now. Okay, we're gonna talk about Nazis. Everybody, we can get back into that mode. Um, okay, recently you posted about Nazi Germany and the church's complicity. It's just really this like s- sobering reminder of how easily we Christians can become silent or even supportive in some cases in the face of, I'm going to say evil,
Mhm.
um, injustice, people being hurt, innocent people being hurt. So can you unpack that for us? Like, explain the parallels because you said you're a history buff, you're really interested in that time period. Like, I wanna hear about the parallels of that uprising in Nazi Germany because I think it's really easy for us to look back now and go like, "Oh, they were just all bad. They were all bad. They were all just Nazis. They were all evil people." And I don't think it's really the case, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what parallels you see today, and what does that teach us about the dangers of being neutral or being silent in this time as Christians?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is funny. I think, well, number one, there's so many layers to that question, right? If you look back in history and you look at where, the Nazi Party studied their laws, it was from Jim Crow, right? It was based on laws that we saw in Virginia and California, here in Florida. So they took those laws, they took Jim Crow to its logical conclusion. That's all they did. And then the resistance to that was also learned here, where Bonhoeffer came over and learned resistance from the Black church and then took that back to help lead that resistance. And so you do see these parallels of like where history's not repeating itself, but it is rhyming. It's like the second verse, same as the first, right? So you do see those deep parallels between the cruelty that eventually happened in Germany and the cruelty that is building up here in the United States. Now, it may never reach that fevered pitch, but nobody in Germany before it happened would have said, yeah, that's going to happen. Nobody, right? And you had these churches filled with good people, like just normal everyday people. And this might make some people mad too. Not every person that is MAGA is an evil human being, right? They had their reasons that
Absolutely.
their fears or their insecurities, and Trump, for all of his idiocy and can't string a sentence together, for some reason has tapped into those deep-seated fears of these people that drives them to do what they're doing, to stand in front of Alligator Alcatraz sign and take pictures, to buy merchandise off of Etsy. And Etsy, shame on you. Shame on you for doing that. So he's able to tap into those fears. But if you look at the parallels, you had the German church and then you had the confessing church. And the confessing church was, the Bonhoeffer side of the church. It was the non-empirical side, the side that would not get into bed with politics and power. And then you had the German church, who, just like white Christian nationalism, sees Christianity as a power. We're going to legislate our view of God and force it upon everybody else because we're bringing his kingdom to earth, but we're going to do it through political power. So it's literally right there. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a dumbing down of our public schools, because they don't want people to know the history. They don't want people here in the state of Florida to freaking read about Ruby Bridges, because the people who are voting that stuff out, it was their parents and their grandparents who threw those rocks. Sorry, I didn't mean to get loud.
Yes, get loud. We have to
Yes.
get loud right now.
Yeah. So there's all these parallels right now. So for listeners, in the ways that you can do so sustainably, and that's really, really important, you've got to find what you can do that you can do sustainably and in a healthy way, because we're in a long fight here. This is not going away at midterms, right? Like, even if we're able to flip seats in the midterms and stop a lot of this, the fight's not over. We will be fighting this for the rest of our lives. So we have to look at it like that. So what can you do that you can do for the long haul? Pick your thing that you can do that fills your cup, that challenges this growing nationalism, and then do that. So for me, like, that's why I typically, if I'm going to criticize MAGA, it's going to be where it intersects with Christian spirituality, right? I will speak to some policy issues, but only because they're doing it in the name of Jesus. So there's lots of stuff I would love to like hammer on, but it's outside my lane. I'm not a this, that, or the other. I'm a pastor. So I'm going to speak to it from a pastor position. And if more pastors in the German church had done that, if more Christians had spoken up in the German church, maybe the National Socialist Party would have never gotten to where it got. We'll never know, though, because they didn't. I said it before, I think we're in a Bonhoeffer moment. We're in those early moments where if we just keep letting them take an inch and an inch and an inch and an inch, we're going to look up. There's going to be another concentration camp there. They're planning on building one in Camp Blanding here, another one here in the state of Florida, which is literally like an hour away from us, 45 minutes. So they're going to convert that into another concentration camp. And there's already reports coming out of abuses and lack of food and shelter and all of these things. If you want to know about it, you need to follow Representative Angie Nixon in Florida. She's one of the people here in the state that's leading the fight against it. And they've just filed, at the time of this recording, yesterday, they filed a lawsuit against the state government because of this, because they misappropriated funds and are doing all kinds of evil. But like it's rhyming. Like this is just another verse of the same song.
Yeah. And let's be clear, I think something that we as evangelical conservatives were entrenched in at some point is the bubble that always has a justification for why, like, yeah, that sounds bad, but like they're criminals, they're all bad people. So like really, like we're safer. And can you speak to that? Because that's what I hear now, right? Is like, well, yeah, that sounds terrible, but like I'm safer and my family is safer, right? Is that true?
It's it's oh, so if you look at history, go back to history again. What one of the brilliant things that the Nazi Party did early on were the brown shirts. It was brilliant. They would go into an area, create chaos, and then they would come in and solve the chaos, right? They were creating problems so that they could
Definitely.
provide solutions,
Yeah.
yeah, to these manufactured problems. It's the same thing. Stephen Miller, I'm telling you, Stephen Miller is from central casting of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like he was one of the Nazis that should have been around. And I know this is really going to age me, but Gen X here. So like Indiana Jones that should have had his face melted around the Ark of the Covenant, like one of the Nazis, or it should have been one of the guys punched by Indiana Jones. So they're just repeating the same thing. They're making those claims, right? And you know what? I have zero issue with enforcing the laws. I think that we should change them. I think it's a broken system. But I have no issues enforcing the laws, especially when it comes to those people that will commit those violent crimes or have committed those violent crimes. Still think you got to follow the Constitution. I still think you have to do it in a humane way. But that's not what's happening. Like we're seeing moms and dads. We're seeing foster kids. I don't know if you can cuss on your podcast, but I want to right now.
You can. You can
That,
cuss
yeah.
on my podcast.
What the fuck is that? Foster children. Are you kidding me? Oh my God in heaven. And so like here they're even having to rewrite laws because they have devastated which is another topic. They devastated the agricultural industry here in the state of Florida to the point where they're having to be like, "Oh wait, we're going to recreate a legal slavery system so that they can stay here. The owners will be responsible, but they can stay here and work because we don't have anybody else to do this," which is a whole nother discussion about plantation capitalism that we have with so many of our systems.
There is a generation of adult kids
Yeah.
who were raised in evangelical Christianity, grieving, losing loved ones, parents, grandparents, uncles, siblings, our best friends. Like, we are not separated from all the MAGA stuff, right? A lot of us who grew up Christian, because many of us grew up evangelical fundamentalists. So we, in another timeline, perhaps could see that we ourselves could have ended up MAGA. And I think
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's just very easy. We understand
Mhm.
like
Yep.
the religious depth, right, of MAGA. And so this generation of us who are just grieving, feeling like we've lost loved ones, right? Like as someone preaching in the US today, like what do you believe that we should do as these adult kids? And how should we just move on? Or how should we move through the world?
Yeah. That's such a tough question, right?
I know.
Such a tough question. And it is, but it's one of the things that we're all wrestling with, right? I think one of the things that I really had to come to terms with, especially as I do my own healing work and not to use buzz phrases, but like legitimately shadow work and those kinds of things, is recognizing that much of what I hate is just a reflection of things inside me already. There are things that in my MAGA friend that I have breakfast with on a pretty regular basis, there are things that I hear him or see him do or hear him say that are a reflection of parts of me, right? And so like I have to be careful because the violence that I want to commit on him is the violence I'm doing to myself already, or I was doing, right? Or taught to do to myself, right? the psychological violence. So I think that we have to recognize those parts in us. Like I think that's the brilliance of some of Jesus's teaching about loving our enemies, because loving our enemies is really about loving ourselves. Now that metaphor eventually will unravel and falls apart, right? Like all metaphors do. But so much of what we see and hate out there are things that we hate about ourselves, and that's really hard to come to terms with. The internalized racism I was given, right? Internalized misogyny that so many women have that support these systems, right? Or coming out of that, I mean, there's just these things that we were given um, by white Christian nationalism, and they were given to us at such an early age that they are like rooted down deep, and they grow and they take such a hold, and they are foundational. So I think that we have to like first like recognize, okay, why am I feeling this way? Not just because it is wrong, but why the visceral reaction that some of us have. And I think part of that is because like, oh, there it is. I see that. That could be me, like you said. That could easily be me. The other stuff, man, I'm really reluctant to like give blanket advice, especially when it comes to like our loved ones. I've got some family that are MAGA. I've just decided I'm not going to cut them off. I'm not going to cut them off. They're going to hear it. That doesn't mean I'm going to shut up, but I'm going to love them through it, because one of these days their eyes are going to be opened. And because of who I am, if I can't give them that space to learn and grow, they will never learn and grow. Now, not everybody can do that, and nor should everybody do that, right? Like some people listening to this legitimately need to cut people off. They need to protect themselves because they are in serious, there's danger, but that's not me. It's going to take a whole lot more for me to be in danger. So I can do that. So I'm not going to cut them off. A lot of what people need to do, they probably already know what they need to do. And that kind of starts with like learning to trust yourself, learning to trust your instincts, learning to kind of trust your gut. Different people are going to have different boundaries, but it's such a sad, sad place. I haven't lost family, but I have lost all of the friends that I made. Like most of the friends that I made in high school and college, all of the people that were in my wedding, you know, they're all gone. They're all gone. These people that I've known for literally 20, 30 years to use that phrase, we lived together. We did life together
Yeah.
in formative
Right.
moments.
Hmm.
They're all gone. They're all gone. And it's a mourning process. I'm not going to be the one to draw the lines of exclusion, because I'm not going to mirror MAGA, but I will honor the lines of exclusions that they draw, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah,
That
that's very helpful. I don't
yeah,
I don't think anybody has clear answers right now. We're all kind of struggling with that, but that's very helpful. There is such a disproportionate amount of content that's going right wing, especially for young men, and it's about the strongman stuff. And I have a theory that I think a lot of people want to go online to find Christian content, and there's such an imbalance right now of what they're being pushed to, especially like young guys who look to people that look like you. How do you think people like you and people who have the privileges you do can help counterbalance this online narrative that is disproportionate to help younger people get access to different lenses of the Christian faith?
that is such a good question. That is such a good question. It's such a good question that I think that question goes literally all the way to, and not to talk too much politics, but I think it goes all the way to the top of the Democratic Party, because they're asking the same question, right? We saw that in this last election where, the manosphere really propelled MAGA into the White House. And I I on one hand, my answer would be I don't know, because it's a freaking machine. I mean, there's just so much money being poured into this. That's one thing that not that it's this binary, but like for the sake of the conversation, that's one thing that the right does really, really well is they have their narrative, they stick to the script, and they fund those things like crazy.
Mhm.
So they know what they're doing. The other side of that, I think, is just like some of us have really got to learn to start speaking out. My son is 15, getting ready to be 16. And I mentioned this ahead of time that it does. And I keep telling Buddy, you got to stop pausing and showing me these videos. Like I will have this conversation with you all day long because he'll see something and bring it to me, and it's Charlie Kirk or one of those kind of guys, and we'll sit down and talk about it. But I tell him, but that's the algorithm. Every time you interact with that, it's going to feed you more of it. And it's already, like you said, it's already skewed that way anyway. So I think places like if we're talking about us, the Christian side of things, whether it's church or whatever it is, I think that we have to start speaking into a healthy masculinity. I honestly think this might cause some feelings for some people. I think that one of the unrecognized harms of the other side is the regressive left, where they just recreate a fundamentalism that we just came from. They just dress it up differently. It's the exact same structure. It creates the same kind of purity tests. It creates the same kind of scenarios where if you aren't enough of this or that, or say enough of this or that, you cannot be in this space. And so the language that a lot of young men are hearing is like, you are the problem, not the system. You are the problem. And that may not, that may not be what's trying to be communicated, but I work with students still too. I see my son's friends and the other guys that are here and stuff, and that's kind of what they pick up. Now, I don't think that that's totally intended. So I think that we have to start speaking into a healthy masculinity. I think that we have to be careful with the structures that we recreate. And I think that we have to give space for people to freaking learn. Again, not everybody can do that. But damn it, if I didn't have a group of people that gave me space to ask questions and learn, I don't know that I would have been able to get to where I am, right? I had people that gave me permission to sometimes say the wrong thing. Not because I was trying to, but because I just didn't know better, right? And I had those people, thankfully, in my life that gave me some direction. And do not hear me say that it is the woman's job, that it is the a person of color's job, that it is the queer person's job to educate me, right? It's not the indigenous person's job to educate me. It's my job. But that being said, it is so helpful when there is a space to learn, to grow, to ask, to be safe, to make mistakes. And so I think that we have got to give that to young men, and not just for their sake, but for the sake of the entire country, because of the epidemic that we're seeing in young men. And the right is doing a good job of filling a void by giving them the things that feel good internally. It's going to break them later. It's going to destroy families 10 years down the road, right? But right now in this moment, yeah. Well, because if you're telling young men all the time, like, God has created you this way. This is what it means to be a man. We're gonna go out there and we're gonna tug of war and we're gonna yell and rage and strength and strong and lift and throw and that's all that what it means to be a man is, right? Then by the way, let's add into that mix that God has created you to lead and not anybody else. God does only speaks through you, but not the weaker vessel, not the woman. So when you do get married, and you need to get married, you need to get married, you need to have babies, and that woman needs to stay home and keep the house and blah blah blah. They can dress it up in whatever fragrant, flowery, complementarian language. It's still all that. That's what it boils down to. And so if you teach a young man that, and that's what he walks into that relationship with, and unfortunately, so many of those young women that are in those same spaces are being indoctrinated into the same thing. That's not sustainable because it's abuse. And eventually, that abusive relationship is going to fall apart and families are going to be destroyed. Even if it doesn't fall apart as far as like the institution of marriage is concerned, they're still married, that family is going to tear itself apart. That's just the fruit of that tree. Don't argue with me. Look at what happens, I take it up with that. So if we don't start offering a better version of masculinity, that cycle is just going to continue to repeat itself because young people are fundamentalist in nature, right? That's just the way their brain thinks. It's very black and white until, brain development. Like we've got to recognize that. So if we don't start offering a healthier alternative, then the right's going to continue to suck these young men in with the UFC style Jesus, which, I'm a guy. I like sports. I like UFC. When I was in my 20s, I was very much that way, very much black and white, very Christian nationalist. But as I got older and learned, and wisdom comes with age, right? Life experience. So we've got to give that to these young men. We have to.
Yes. Yes, also to make really good husbands and fathers for my daughters.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I've got a daughter, she's getting married. She's getting married in November, and the guy that she's with is a sweetheart. He's such a kind and gentle man, and he's also, like, 6'3" and, 225 pounds and beard and, he looks like the kinda guy that you don't wanna mess with, but he's sweet and gentle and kind and, all the things that we want for our daughter to have in a partner. He's a healthy, masculine person. Thankfully, he grew out of his little Charlie Kirk phase quickly, but while he was in high school. He moved past that while he was in high school. So,
We all have
you
to go
know,
through a little Charlie Kirk phase, right?
we
To
will,
get to
and
where we are.
right, and you know what? And I think that that's another thing that, like, as we go through we have to understand that people operate within systems as we grow, and so we've got to give space for people. They're teen boys are drawn to things like MAGA, right? Because it's bombastic. It's WWE on a national stage. That's what Trump is. He's a WWE character. And that's why WWE speaks to teen boys, and always has. Why UFC, it's these big personalities that say the craziest stuff and over the top. But eventually, hopefully, most people will begin to grow past that and see it for what it is. Um, and so I think that we've got to give space. We've got to understand that it might be a phase. And if we can just navigate that, if we can help point our young men in 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 increments, maybe, even if it's slow work, I think over time we're going to see a healthier outcome than what we're seeing right now.
Oof,
Again,
that's
too,
great.
you can also start at home if you're a parent. Start young. My son, he grew up with a sister. Dude wanted makeup and his nails done too, and all of the things. And hell yes, do it with your
Yep.
sister, man. Like,
So did my
of
brother.
course,
Yep.
yeah, of course. And so he grew up around women. He grew up around strong women. He's 15 and he thinks this stuff is ridiculous. You know, so I'm incredibly proud of who my son is and who he's going to be as a young man. But we started young. I mean, we started it when he was really little. So there's that too, right? Like, if you're having kids, start early. Don't ever let it take hold. But for the vast majority, it's taken hold, and I think that we got to create spaces where they can deconstruct and not lose everything when they do it wrong or they say it wrong.
Oh, such good insights, Joe. That's really helpful about young men. I know that a lot of people in Democratic Party are just trying to figure it out, and I think it starts within Christianity to provide the insights that you talked about. You really understand. So as we close today, there will be people listening who have not been prayed over in a long time. I was wondering if you could pray for them.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. You saw it earlier. And if you ever watch any of my teachings or whatever, I'm an emotional person. I am an emotional guy. And I can cry at the drop of a hat. So I'm gonna do my best because I've got this image of these people in my mind now. And so, like, I'm gonna do my best to hold it together. Okay, but no promises.
No promises, and big emotions are from God as well.
Yes, yes, they are. Yes, they are. All right, let's pray. Creator, um, thank you for this time. Thank you for the sacred slope. Thank you for the ability to gather digitally from all over the world where I'm all the way on the East Coast and she's on the West Coast, and we're able to have this conversation. Spirit, I pray that you speak to each of us in the ways that we can hear. Motivate us and move us to create beloved communities wherever we are. And not just recreating the fundamentalism that we ran away from, but giving space for those that we want to other, that are othering themselves. Right now, Spirit, I pray that you would wrap the people that are listening that don't have those communities, that don't have that space. I pray that you would speak into their hearts and that you would communicate that just unending love that that our creator has for us. I pray that they feel connection in ways that maybe they haven't in some time. I pray I pray that their eyes are opened to how love continually moves and continually invites us to partner with it in ways that are life-giving to them. I thank you for the example of Jesus and the way that he lived, um, the way that he calls us to live. And sometimes it's so hard, especially right now. I just want to, I want to punch and I want to rage and I want to hate. Um, and I want to feed those things in myself. Um, but give me the strength to not do that, to choose that narrow way of how we treat people. Um, I thank you for this time together. I thank you for Alexis and the space that she has created here. I pray that that through the airwaves, through the conversations that she's having, Lord, that hearts are changed, even if it's just one at a time. Help us to see goodness when so much around us is just on fire. Help us to be goodness when so much around us is on fire. Help us to embody those things. Thank you for the ability to do that. Thank you for this time together. We pray all of these things in the name of the one who showed us the way. Amen.
Amen. Pastor Joe Smith. Joe, thank you so much for being on the Sacred Slope today.
Yeah, it was such a good conversation. I love this so much. Thanks for inviting me on, Alexis.
Thanks for joining us today on the Sacred Slope. May the fruit of the Spirit blossom in you and guide you this week. To nominate a pastor, priest, or clergy member for the show, email me at alexis@thesacredslope.com. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and download wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Alexis Rice. Music by Brett Rutledge, Eddie Urban, and Sean Spence. Go in peace, friends.
Safety in the questioning. Home is where you're wandering. You're right where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be.